Mas Amedda was a blue-skinned Chagrian who carried Chancellor Palpatine's ceremonial staff during the Clone Wars. By 19 BBY, he held the title of Grand Vizier of the Galactic Empire. On paper, he outranked every Moff, every Admiral, and every Grand Admiral in Imperial service. He outranked Tarkin. He outranked Vader's military command. He outranked Thrawn. And nobody knows who he is because he was meant to be ignored. Behind him, in the actual operational role, stood Sate Pestage, the man who ran the Imperial bureaucracy in the way Martin Bormann ran the Nazi Party. Amedda was the public face. Pestage was the shadow. Palpatine designed the whole structure to be deliberately illegible. That title, Grand Vizier, comes from West End Games' Imperial Sourcebook, written by Greg Gorden, published October 1989, product code WEG40006, ISBN 08743-11357, 144 pages. It is the first complete in-universe organizational chart of the Galactic Empire ever printed. The book describes a body called the Select Committee of COMPNOR, the Commission for the Preservation of the New Order, chaired by a single official designated Grand Vizier. Every coalition within COMPNOR is led by a Vizier. Every Vizier holds a seat on Imperial High Command, and the Grand Vizier chairs the entire selection apparatus. The Saga Edition Core Rulebook, published by Wizards of the Coast on May 24, 2007, ISBN 978-07869-4356, 286 pages, consolidates this structure across the expanded universe and confirms it in the canonical role-playing continuity. Two separate game publishers, 18 years apart, both arrive at the same chain of command. The Emperor sits at the top. The Grand Vizier sits beneath him. Beneath the Grand Vizier sits everything else. That is what is on paper. What is on screen is a Chagrian standing next to Palpatine for 3 films, holding a staff, opening and closing his mouth, and never being called by his name. Mas Amedda first appears in The Phantom Menace, released May 19, 1999. He is Vice Chair of the Galactic Senate under Chancellor Finis Valorum. He is the figure who calls the Senate to order. Booming voice, flick of the forked tongue, sensory tentacles hanging down across his blue shoulders. He is a Chagrian, a species from the inner rim planet Champala. The skin color is real biology. Chagrian skin pigmentation ranges from cerulean to indigo because Champala's sun is unstable, and the species evolved under elevated background radiation. Mas Amedda is the only Chagrian most viewers will ever see. He is given a single procedural function, and he performs it. Order, he says. We will have order. The Senate, deadlocked over Naboo, refuses to grant Queen Amidala's emergency motion. Amedda turns the floor to her. The vote of no confidence is called. Valorum falls. Palpatine rises. Amedda swears allegiance to the new Chancellor before the dust settles. By the next morning, he is the second most senior figure in the Republic, and almost nobody in the audience can tell you his name. He appears again in Attack of the Clones, released May 16, 2002. He is in the background of every Senate chamber sequence, the Chief of Staff role, ceremonial gatekeeper, Palpatine's left-hand silhouette. He does not speak much. He does not need to. The Phantom Menace had already established what he is for. By the second film, he is no longer presiding over the chamber. He is presiding over the man who presides over the chamber. The Senate is being eroded around him, and Amedda is the figure standing closest to the Chancellor at every moment of that erosion. He is there when the Military Creation Act is debated. He is there when Padme Amidala arrives from Naboo. He is there when the news of the assassination attempt is received. He is there when Palpatine assumes emergency powers. He is there, just there, not speaking, holding the staff. And then comes Revenge of the Sith, released May 19, 2005, where Amedda finally does speak. Not by name. He is never addressed as Mas Amedda by anyone in the dialogue, and his title is never spoken aloud on screen. But he is given lines. Then he is not dead, he says, on hearing of Anakin Skywalker's survival on Mustafar. Yes, Master, he tells Palpatine, in the corridor of the medical center. "Senator Organa," he announces, "the Supreme Chancellor requests your presence at a special session of Congress." It is the call to the session in which the Republic is declared an empire. The voice of the figure announcing the end of democracy is Mas Amedda's voice. The audience has watched him for 6 years across 3 films and will never once hear him called by his name. The Clone Wars animated series, which ran on Cartoon Network and later on Disney Plus from 2008 onward, finally gives Amedda a sustained voice, provided by Stephen Stanton, who has described Amedda as the first character he ever played on the show, voice-matched in Season 2's Duchess of Mandalore episode. Stanton voices the same character through the Bad Batch series and through later canon material. But the animated continuity does not solve the substantive dialogue problem either. Amedda is still announcing, still calling for order, still receiving deputations, still standing at the Emperor's elbow. The character is given a voice. He is not given an argument. He is not given a moment of agency. He is, in every appearance across all media, the figure who reads the next item on the agenda. By the time Palpatine declares himself Emperor, 19 BBY in the canonical timeline, Mas Amedda has been given the title of Grand Vizier of the Galactic Empire. This is the highest-ranking administrative officer in the entire Imperial system. He leads the Imperial Ruling Council, the body that oversees daily affairs of the Empire from Coruscant. He is the deputy of Emperor Palpatine. He has the authority to summon high-ranking military officials, to receive visiting governors, and to administer the bureaucratic apparatus that holds the Empire together. He is, in administrative terms, the second most powerful figure in the galaxy, and he is still not named in dialogue. But Amedda is the face. The shadow is somebody else. Sate Pestage was born in the city of Diplona on Sutric IV, a world later absorbed into the Sutric hegemony in the Outer Rim. He is human. He has no military rank, no senatorial seat, no public title in the standard sense. He is, in every source that places him, Palpatine's personal aide. He was first introduced in print in the Star Wars Expanded Universe through Dark Horse Comics, specifically X-Wing Rogue Squadron, issue 21, published in 1997, written by Michael A. Stackpole, with the character referenced earlier in the Battleground Tatooine arc from 1996. The brief that some EU sources list, that Pestage was a former pirate, is the kind of rumor that follows men who manage the private accounts of dictators. The canonical materials characterize the pirate claim, and the related rumors about Pestage being a Palpatine clone or a forgotten son as unfounded. What is documented is that Pestage was with Palpatine from the senatorial days on Naboo, that he co-engineered the Eriadu Trade Summit incident that politically destroyed Chancellor Valorum, and that he was inducted into the larger conspiracy depicted in James Luceno's Darth Plagueis novel, published by Del Rey on January 10, 2012. By the founding of the Empire, Pestage is the official who controls the day-to-day operations of the bureaucracy. He manages Palpatine's calendar. He screens his communications. He oversees his personal affairs. He is, in every operational sense, the man who runs the Empire when the Emperor is busy being the Emperor. In Luceno's Darth Plagueis, Pestage's role is sketched all the way back to the assassination of Senator Vidar Kim, Palpatine's predecessor as Naboo's Senate representative. The novel describes Pestage organizing the cover, Pestage moving the funds, Pestage retaining the freelance assassins. The same novel places Pestage at the Eriadu Trade Summit during the outbound flight crisis, where he plants compromising materials to ensure Chancellor Valorum is politically barred from intervening directly in the Naboo blockade. Every move in that sequence, the move that delivers Palpatine the chancellorship in The Phantom Menace, is one Pestage operationalizes. The film shows the Senate vote and Palpatine's reaction shot. The novel shows the backroom work. Pestage is the backroom work. He has been the backroom work for 30 years before the Empire is declared. The audience handed the channel the analogy that closes the gap. Goering and Bormann, the public face and the shadow, the man on the rostrum and the man with the appointments diary. That parallel needs to be drawn carefully. The history is precise. Hermann Goering was the most visible Nazi after Hitler himself. He was Reichsmarschall, a rank created for him in 1940, senior to every field marshal in the Wehrmacht. He was Supreme Commander of the Luftwaffe from 1935 to April 1945. He was Minister-President of Prussia from 1933. He was President of the Reichstag from 1932 to 1945. He was Plenipotentiary of the Four-Year Plan from 1936. He was Hitler's designated successor. He stood next to Hitler at every state function. The German public knew his face, his uniform, his medals. He was the regime's public face. Martin Bormann was almost the opposite. Bormann was head of the Nazi Party Chancellery from May 12, 1941, officially Hitler's personal secretary from April 12, 1943. He held no senior military rank. He held no parliamentary office. He was nicknamed the Brown Eminence, a reference to Cardinal Richelieu's Grey Eminence, the priestly aide who ran Bourbon France while the cardinal stood at the front. Bormann controlled access to Hitler. He drew up the Führer's daily appointments. He filtered the cables and the visitors. He decided who saw the dictator and when. By 1943, with Hitler focused on military matters, Bormann effectively ran domestic policy from the Chancellery. The German public could not have picked him out of a lineup. He was the regime's shadow. The structural parallel between that pair and the Imperial pair is exact. Amedda is the visible figure, the chair of the council, the deputy who receives governors, the official whose title appears on the masthead of the empire. Sate Pestage is the operational figure, the man who manages the schedule, the cables, the access, the bureaucracy. Goering and Bormann, Amedda and Pestage. Two pairs of names that map onto the same template. The parallel is structural, not one-for-one historical. Goering and Bormann were not cooperative partners. They were bitter rivals. Bormann actively engineered Goering's fall in April 1945 by convincing Hitler that Goering's telegram requesting permission to assume leadership was treason. Goering would be stripped of every title, arrested by the SS at Berchtesgaden, convicted by the International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg of conspiracy, crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, and would commit suicide by cyanide capsule on October 15, 1946, the night before his scheduled execution. Bormann himself would die on May 2, 1945, fleeing Berlin past the Lehrter Bahnhof. His remains would not be located until 1972 and would not be DNA confirmed until 1998, more than 50 years after the war. Two men, same regime, different fates, same office of administrative shadow. The structural template each one represents has outlived both of them by 80 years. The Amedda Pestage relationship in the expanded universe is not adversarial in the same way. It is cooperative in the sense that both men serve the same dictator, and both men occupy roles Palpatine deliberately designed to be parallel. What carries across, the only thing that needs to carry across, is the architecture. A dictator needs both a face and a shadow. Hitler had both. Palpatine had both. The administrative theory is consistent, and the doctrine that the Empire's chain of command was deliberately illegible has its own paper trail. James Luceno's Tarkin, published by Del Rey on November 4, 2014, as one of the first 4 novels of the post-Disney canon reboot, formalized the Disney-era Imperial ruling council on the page. The council includes Grand Vizier Amedda, Sate Pestage as senior advisor, Janus Grijatus, Ars Dangor, Kren Blistavani, Sly Moore, and Verge. 6 advisors plus the vizier. All of them human or near human apart from Amedda himself. All of them with direct line to Palpatine. None of them with operational responsibility for the military. The Tarkin novel shows Grand Vizier Amedda transmitting a communique to Grand Moff Tarkin, requesting an audience on Coruscant. Administrative chain operating exactly as the Imperial Sourcebook designed it. The Empire is being run, on the page, by a council of unnamed clerks. What Luceno did in the canon reboot was preserve the Legends structure under different name attribution. In Legends, the continuity that ran from 1977 to April 2014, Sate Pestage was the Grand Vizier. He was the sole holder of the title. Amedda was vice chair of the Senate during the Republic, and in the Imperial period, he served on the ruling council, but did not carry the Vizier rank. When Disney rebooted the continuity in April 2014, the title moved. The Grand Vizier became Amedda. Sate Pestage was demoted on the organization chart to Senior Advisor. The two characters did not swap titles within a single fictional timeline. The titles were rotated between them across a continuity wall. Same two men, same shadow government, different nameplates. What persists across both versions is the design principle. A dictator with overlapping bureaucracies, one public, one operational, keeps every middle-tier officer permanently uncertain about who actually holds power. A Moff in the Outer Rim does not know whether to honor an order from Amedda or to route around him through Pestage. A Grand Admiral receiving a directive does not know whether the Council issued it or whether one of the inner advisors slid it past Palpatine without minutes. A sector governor with a grievance cannot identify the office that would hear it. The chain of command becomes a maze. The Emperor sits at the center. Every officer at every rank is functionally isolated. Nobody coordinates across the seams. Nobody coups the dictator. There is an EU debate that has to be flagged here because the audience should hear both sides. The Imperial Ruling Council Wikipedia entry, drawn from Lucino's Tarkin and reinforced by Catalyst, holds that the Council had direct access to the Emperor and acted as his deputies, with all Moffs, generals, admirals, and other upper-level figures reporting to them in turn. That reading places Amedda above Tarkin in the administrative chain. The Grand Moff entry, drawn from the same source materials and from the Saga Edition rulebook, holds that Grand Moffs were on equal footing with the Grand Vizier and the Commander-in-Chief, and having been similarly appointed by the Emperor himself. That reading places Amedda alongside Tarkin, not above him. Both readings are EU-sourced. Both have textual support. The truth depends on whether the chain of command is read as administrative primacy or as peer officer parity. The deliberate illegibility doctrine resolves the dispute by making it the wrong question. The whole point of the design is that no two officers ever know which reading is operative on any given day. That is not contradiction. That is the structure working as intended. The Bantam-era expanded universe spelled this out across 2 decades of novels. Drew Karpyshyn was not the writer who carried the Pestage thread. That was Stackpole on the comic side, and Daniel Wallace in his new Essential Guide to Characters, published by Del Rey on April 23, 2002, which contained dedicated entries for both Pestage and Amedda. Sansweet and Hidalgo's Complete Star Wars Encyclopedia, published by Lucas Books in December 2008 across 3 hardcover volumes, ISBN 978-0345-477637, gave both men their canonical Legends entries side by side. The doctrine, Palpatine-engineered parallel hierarchies, runs through all of these reference works. The dictatorship history parallel is not unique to the Empire. The Bormann-Goering structure is the most cited 20th century example, but it is not the only one. Stalin ran the Soviet state through overlapping NKVD, party secretariat, and Politburo structures that reported to him on 3 separate channels. Beria managed the security apparatus. Molotov managed foreign affairs. Malenkov managed the party machine. Each had operational authority in his lane, and each was prevented by Stalin from coordinating with the others. The historian who studies authoritarian administration calls this technique deliberate overlap. Mao ran the People's Republic the same way. The Cultural Revolution depended on the deliberate setting of party against army, against Red Guards, against Public Security Bureau. The dictator's bureaucratic design pattern is well documented in real history. The Empire is one of its cleanest fictional instances. And the West End Games Sourcebook, in 1989, with Greg Gorden working from George Lucas's prequel-era story Bible, got the doctrine on the page before any of the prequel films were made. The Imperial Sourcebook's specific contribution was the chart. Before 1989, the Empire on screen was a vibe, a uniform, a march, a Star Destroyer, a Death Star, an Emperor. Gordon's book turned the vibe into an org chart. The Select Committee at the top of COMPNOR, chaired by the Grand Vizier. Beneath that, the Coalition for Progress, the Coalition for Diplomacy, the Coalition for Improvements, each led by its own vizier. Beneath that, Imperial Intelligence, Imperial Security Bureau, Sector Plexus, the subdepartments. And parallel to all of that, the Imperial Military proper, the Imperial Navy, the Imperial Army, the Stormtrooper Corps, reporting to its own command structure. Two pyramids, side by side, each one half the size of the visible regime. A Moff in the field reports through the military pyramid to the Imperial High Command. A bureaucrat in the same sector reports through the COMPNOR pyramid to the Select Committee. Both pyramids ultimately reach the Emperor. Neither pyramid crosses the other. That is the diagram. Gorden published it in 1989. Wizards of the Coast preserved it across the Saga Edition rulebook in 2007. Luceno carried it into Disney canon in 2014. Each of those publishers, working at different decades with different editorial mandates, produced the same picture. That is not coincidence. That is George Lucas's original story Bible structure being faithfully transmitted across 30 years of secondary material. The films do not show it. The novels and the source books do. The audience that reads the novels and the source books knows. The audience that watches only the films does not. Pestage and Amedda do not appear together in dialogue in any film. They share screen time only in animated material and in the Marvel Comics line. Where they are documented as both operating in the same room is in Luceno's Tarkin. Chapter scenes set in the Imperial Palace where the Council convenes. There, in 14 BBY, the novel places them together with Sly Moore, with Ars Dangor, with Janus Grijatus, all in the Emperor's antechamber. Tarkin himself attends and observes the body. He sees how it functions. He sees that the Council is not a deliberative chamber. It is a switchboard. Palpatine speaks, the advisors transmit. The advisors do not deliberate, they route. Sly Moore deserves a line here too, because she completes the structure. Moore is an Umbaran female, pale skin, hollow eyes, force-sensitive in the rare talent sense, one of the few non-Sith characters in the canon who knows the Emperor's true identity as Darth Sidious. She first appears in Attack of the Clones as senior administrative aide. By Revenge of the Sith, she is chief of staff. By the Tarkin novel, she is on the council. 3 administrative figures in the inner circle, all with direct line to Palpatine. Amedda the Vizier, Pestage the senior advisor, Moore the chief of staff. None of them with military authority. All of them with information authority. The dictator surrounds himself with administrators. The administrators surround the dictator with information he cannot bypass. Vader is the public symbol of the regime's violence. The 3 administrators are the public absence of the regime's actual operating apparatus. Vader is loud. The administrators are silent. The silent ones run the Empire. The prequel trilogy gave Amedda visual presence and almost no narrative weight. The Aftermath trilogy by Chuck Wendig, published by Del Rey across 2015, 2016, and February 2017, gave him his largest on-page treatment, and it is a humiliation. In Aftermath, Empire's End, Amedda is held a virtual prisoner inside the Imperial Palace by Counselor Gallius Rax, the Imperial military officer who has assumed real authority after Palpatine's death. Amedda's grand title is decorative. The actual administrative apparatus is being run elsewhere. Amedda attempts to escape and fails. He is then approached by a resistance cell of Coruscanti street children calling themselves the Ankle-Biter Brigade. The brigade come to assassinate the Grand Vizier. He convinces them to instead help him defect to the New Republic. The most senior surviving Imperial official is smuggled out of the Imperial Palace by children. He signs the Galactic Concordance on the Crystal Cliffs north of Hana City on Chandrila, opposite Mon Mothma, who is accompanied by Princess Leia Organa and 2 new advisors. Leia goes into labor with Ben Solo on the same day. The Galactic Civil War formally ends. The signature on the Imperial side belongs to Mas Amedda. It is the only piece of media in either continuity in which Mas Amedda is the operational protagonist of a sustained narrative sequence. The framing is correct. He ends the Empire formally. But the framing is also degrading. The Grand Vizier, whose office on paper outranked Tarkin, is, in his one substantive arc, a captive being rescued by children so he can sign a surrender. That is canon's account of the Imperial second-in-command. Pestage's Legends post-Endor arc is no kinder. After Palpatine's death at Endor in 4 ABY, Pestage assumes control of Coruscant as interim emperor. The other advisors turn on him. Izan Isard, director of Imperial intelligence, maneuvers herself into position as his neutral broker, and then engineers his downfall from inside his own office. Pestage flees Coruscant on his private yacht. He is overthrown. He is killed. The man who managed Palpatine's appointments for 20 years dies in disgrace because the apparatus he ran was illegible to him too. Once the dictator at the top was gone, the structure collapsed into civil war within months. Stackpole's X-Wing Rogue Squadron comics across 1995 to 1998 chronicle the collapse. The Back to War novel, published by Bantam in February 1997, sits in the same narrative window, but does not center Pestage personally. That collapse is the structural consequence of the deliberate illegibility doctrine. A dictatorship organized around overlapping bureaucracies depends on the dictator at the top to mediate between the bureaucracies. The emperor is the only person who knows what every department is doing, the only person who can resolve which administrative order takes precedence over which military directive, the only person who can issue a corrective when two of his deputies issue contradictory commands. Remove the emperor, and the architecture has no center. The council fragments. Moffs declare independence. Grand Admirals take warlord status. Within 12 months of Endor, the Empire is not an empire. It is a constellation of remnants. Pestage in Legends, Amedda in canon, both face the same problem. Neither has the legitimacy to hold the system together. Neither was ever meant to. The system was designed never to have a center other than Palpatine. When Palpatine fell, the system was supposed to fall. What gets remembered about the Empire is the iconography. The Star Destroyer, the Death Star, Vader's mask, Tarkin's collar bars, Thrawn's red eyes. What never gets remembered is the bureaucracy that made the Empire run for 19 years between Palpatine's coronation and his death at Endor. The bureaucracy that drafted the orders, signed the appropriations, scheduled the audiences, and prevented every Moff and Admiral from coordinating with every other Moff and Admiral. The Empire was not a military dictatorship. It was an administrative dictatorship with a military attached. And the men who ran the administration are still, after 47 years of Star Wars, the men nobody has named. The reference works exist. The Imperial Sourcebook is in print at second-hand prices. The Saga Edition rulebook is archived on the Internet Archive and is still in circulation among RPG players. Daniel Wallace's new Essential Guide to Characters is on the shelves of every used bookstore that carries Star Wars material. Luceno's Tarkin is in current Del Rey print. Wendig's Aftermath, Empire's End, is in current print. The audience that wants to know about Mas Amedda and Sate Pestage can find them in 8 different titles published across 35 years. What the audience cannot find, what nobody can find, is the dedicated piece of media. The novel, the miniseries, the half-hour episode, the film. The thing that would center the Imperial second-in-command and the man who managed the Emperor's calendar, and would name them, and would let them speak, and would let the audience see how the dictatorship actually worked from inside the dictator's antechamber. That thing has never been made. The org chart sits on the page. The story has never been filmed. Mas Amedda has been on screen for several minutes across all 3 prequels. He never gets called Grand Vizier in dialogue. He never gets a line of substance. He carries a staff. Sate Pestage has never been on screen. The 2 men who actually ran the Galactic Empire, the Bormann and the Goring of the authoritarian template Star Wars built, have never had a dedicated piece of media. The chain of command Palpatine designed to be illegible is, 50 years after the franchise began, still illegible. Nobody filmed it. The audience already knows. The audience asked. And the audience is still waiting for the video that names them.